Hey everybody, Corey here coming at you with another review, this time of the Bestech Knives Bison. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I try to buy a new knife every month. Don't tell my wife. I always like to start with some of the notable features of the knife compared to other knives where you might not get that. So first of all, I will say the knife has a full forward finger choil. It's actually quite large, you can see there. Some people really like that. Some people with bigger hands, it's useful for them. This is a mid-sized knife, I would say. If you've got average size hands, you're gonna fit a lot of this knife in your hand. But on the off chance that you want this knife and you have quite large hands, you can use the finger choil to choke up, get a little bit more grip on it. Or if you're just doing finer work with the knife, you've got a full finger choil. The next thing, we are dealing with D2 steel. There we go, D2 steel. And I normally don't talk about that unless the knife has the option to come with a black DLC coating, which this one does. The reason I say that is because D2 is prone to corrosion. It's a steel with good edge retention, but it's got low corrosion resistance. So anytime you can get some kind of protective coating on the blade, that's a good thing. I know black coating isn't for everyone, and if you don't like it, you know, whatever, don't get it. But for me, when I have the option to get black DLC coating on a blade, I always do because it offers extra corrosion resistance. The other thing, this knife lets you kind of dip into the luxury pool for a minute. You get a black titanium scale, you get a black titanium pocket clip, and you get this black titanium backspacer. It is all titanium except for the G10 side. We'll talk a little bit more about that down the road, but it's nice. You get the titanium feel to match the build quality. The build quality we will also talk about a little bit later. This comes with a Lockbar insert, which helps prevent lock stick, but it also serves as an overtravel stop. So if you're someone who, for some reason, you really push on your knives like this, you don't have to worry about bending the frame back past the frame itself and reducing your tension there, because the lock functions as a stop as well, the Lockbar insert. And finally, it's riding on ceramic ball bearings, which just help the action on this. We'll get to it, but oh my god, the action on this. So that's what we're looking at. Full forward finger choil, right there. Black DLC coating to help prevent corrosion on a D2 blade. Titanium scales and accents. You got your Lockbar insert, and you got ceramic ball bearings. So that's very nice. Next, let's get into what's really good about this knife. This knife has what I refer to as the trifecta when it comes to the action. That is, it has a good action, right? It's got a good open action. It's got a good drop action. Now, what is the trifecta? Because whenever we're talking about action, we have to talk about the things that go into a good action, right? It's not impressive if a blade drops shut, if the reason that it drops shut is because I loosen the pivot so much that it just falls and the centering is off. So what's the trifecta? A good action with perfect, absolutely flawless centering out of the box. And oh, by the way, no horizontal blade play, no vertical blade play. It has extremely good lockup. It has an extremely good action on the open, extremely good action on the close, and it has perfect centering. That is the trifecta, because a lot of times if you want a good action, you have to loosen the pivot and then the centering is off, or you loosen the pivot and you get blade play. Nothing here. Nothing. I have disassembled this knife once just to play with it, just to clean it up, see the inside. I did not have to tweak this. This is by far the best knife I have ever received out of the box. And oh, by the way, if you disassemble your knives, this is not a proprietary screw. You actually disassemble it from this side. And this is a T10 Torx bit, by the way. That's a little unique. Normally it's like the pivot's a T8 and the rest of the screws are T6s. These are still T6s, but this is a T10, so a little strange there. But this pivot has a D shape to it so that it's not free spinning, so that it's pretty easy to disassemble. So that's great. The blade geometry. I really like the blade geometry. It has a blade with a stock thickness of 0.13 inches. It's about 3 millimeters. But the reason that it works really well, even though it's not super thin, is because it has an extremely high, aggressive flat grind. It has a swedge, but the swedge is pretty small. And then from here down, you get a very aggressive grind. And the tip, I mean, you can see it. It tapers off to the tip as well. That's a very, very, very fine tip. So it's a great slicer. It's tied for first place for one of my best slicers. One other thing, the ergonomics on this knife are absolutely amazing. If I squeeze this knife for dear life, if I squeeze this knife as hard as I can, it is genuinely still comfortable. There are no hot spots on this knife whatsoever. This knife is just absolutely awesome to handle. And I think the reason for that is that it's relatively thick. Here's another knife that I want to use for comparison. This is the CH Knives Emperor. That'll be coming soon. But one of the things that I like to compare here, if you put these side by side, look at the thickness of the handle scales themselves. The Bestech has about an extra millimeter on each scale compared to this Emperor. And why I'm telling you that is because when I bear down on this Emperor, these small scales, because they're not so wide, they dig into my hand. You can see this line that runs across my hand from the knife digging into my hand because the scales are so thin that they kind of hurt when you grab them. However, with the Bestech, because just that 1 millimeter of extra thickness on each scale, no matter how hard I squeeze, this knife is very comfortable. And I know I'm talking about ergonomics quite a bit, but I really can't express how comfortable this knife is. It's really impressive. I've seen some people compare it to the PM2. Not quite sure why. I mean, I guess they're in the same size realm, but I don't know. If you're into comfort, this knife is definitely the one for you. And then finally, this is another thing. I swore I wouldn't rant about it too much, but everything they did with this knife, they did very well. And I want to talk about the pocket clip for a second here, because the pocket clip is a testament to them paying attention, and it's something that the average Joe would not even think twice about. Let's look at this knife dead on, with just dead on from straight up and down, okay? What do you see? When this knife is straight up and down, you see a pocket clip sticking off the side, right? So if this was to sit in your pocket straight up and down, that pocket clip would, or not pocket clip, the flipper tab. The flipper tab would be hanging out right there, and every time you put something in your pocket, your phone or whatever, the flipper tab is in there and it's getting caught on stuff, whatever. I don't really have a big issue with that, but you've got the flipper tab here. Notice something right now about the pocket clip. When this knife is completely straight and that flipper tab is sticking up off the side right there, look at the pocket clip. The pocket clip is not straight. If we move this knife, pay attention to the flipper tab. If I move this knife so that the pocket clip is straight, look at the flipper tab. The flipper tab is completely gone. And that's because they have put this pocket clip on the slightest angle. You can see that it's not quite in line with the Lockbar cutout right here. That very, very, very slight angle was done so that when this is sitting in your pocket and this is flat, the flipper tab is not in your way. It's not in the way of your phone. It's not hitting your phone. It's not in the way of your hand. When you're reaching into your pocket, the knife is already on a slight angle so that the flipper tab is out of the way. It's really nice that they thought about that. Not because the flipper tab is a big deal, not because the pocket clip is a big deal, but because that level of attention to detail just permeates throughout the entire knife. That level of attention to detail is why the fit and finish on this is so good. It's why the centering is perfect with the good action with no blade play. I had to point that out because that level of attention to detail is not something that you get every day. Let's talk about what I think is the bad. I couldn't find a lot and I really had to struggle. The only thing I can say, the detent is kind of soft. If I really want to fail the knife, I can consistently fail the deployment. But guys, I'm telling you, I really, really, really have to try. If you put any effort into flipping this knife at all, just the slightest amount of effort, it's not gonna fail. I hate when people say it's a downside to the knife that you can technically fail the action if you barely push the flipper tab. Who's doing that? Who's pulling their knife out and they're going, come on. I'm sorry, that's a little dramatic, but that's the only thing I could come up with. It's a relatively soft detent. And if I really want to, If I shake it really, really hard, I can gravity flip it. I can deploy it by slamming it, basically. That's really all I've got. As a nitpick, I would say, as someone who really likes titanium, I really wish they offered this knife in a full titanium model. The G10 works for me. It's very nice G10. It's contoured nicely. It's chamfered nicely. And it's got a good texture to it. But if it was up to me, I would love to see this knife in all black titanium. I hate when they only offer asymmetrical scales. I will say they offer a model that has titanium on this side and carbon fiber on the show side. But again, it's technically still asymmetrical, and that one costs you about $20 more. Now, the big bad, the only thing that I can really say, you know what, I don't know how I feel about that. The price on this knife. The MSRP is $110. You can get this on White Mountain Knives for $100 with a 10% off code. I have a 10% off code, link in the description, all that good stuff, whatever. But the reason I'm talking about this, so let's assume you have 10% off. You get this for $100. $100 for D2 steel? That's really pushing it, guys. Like, I love this knife, and I love Bestech, and I love what they've done here. But you're pushing your luck with D2 steel. There are $30 knives that have D2 steel on them. And normally when we're talking about the price of a knife, you've got two things. You've got handle material and you've got blade material. This blade material is dirt cheap, okay? $30 knives have D2 steel on them. And I don't know if one titanium scale, a titanium pocket clip, and a titanium backspacer, I really, really, really don't know if that's worth $100. Just on paper, I don't know if I can comfortably say, yeah, I'd pay $100 for that. You know what I would feel comfortable paying? About $80. But let's talk about this. Let's get to the summary real quick. Because what I want to say about that price, I would feel comfortable paying $80 for this knife, right? But I will say this. If every knife that I bought, you told me, hey, if you paid an extra $20 premium, the knife would be flawless. The ergos would be perfect, the blade shape would be exactly what you want, and the centering and the action would be perfect, and there would be no blade play. If you told me that I could get that, if you upcharged me $20, I would take that deal every single day. So if I'm saying I would pay $80 for this knife, and they're charging $100, I view that $20 gap as the upcharge for this absolutely amazing quality. I am absolutely fine with paying that, and I would absolutely recommend this knife to anybody who is thinking about getting it. Last thing I'll say, in usual Bestech fashion, you get your carrying case. It's dual-sided, so you can put two knives in here if you wanted to. You get your Bestech cleaning cloth as well that I was using as a little prop the whole time. And if you need a size comparison, here's your Bestech. Here's your Ontario Rat 2, which is a relatively small knife. And here is your ZT0452, which is a, excuse me, a relatively large knife. Hope you guys got something out of this. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.